I'm sure that you're all aware of the importance of pacing those longer rides and how crucial it is to success. But despite knowing this, some people continue to get it wrong, particularly during the first hour or two of the ride. The aim of this video is to give you a better understanding of what's going on and therefore be more disciplined with this aspect of your cycling. Let's start with some basic physiology. We each have three different energy sources that we use to pedal our bikes. They each have a different response time or boot up speed and are good for different durations and power outputs. If we think of these systems as fuel tanks, then you have your oxidative fuel tank, your glycolytic fuel tank and your phosphocreatine fuel tank. For the purpose of this video, we can ignore the phosphocreatine tank, which is the one you use for those maximal efforts of just a handful of seconds. It's the fastest system to respond, but it doesn't last very long. Which then leaves us with our two main larger fuel tanks, a little bit like a hybrid car. So our oxidative tank with fats as a fuel is like our battery, and our stored glycogen, which is provided by our carbohydrate intake, is a little bit like our petrol tank. Like the battery in a hybrid car, our battery, our fat reserves, are useful for power outputs at the lower end of the scale. Go above those and we start to tap into our petrol tank, our glycogen reserves. However, in our case, our battery is pretty large and can power us for days upon end, but our petrol tank is tiny by comparison, with around 90 minutes worth of fuel on board. So imagine you are driving this hybrid car on a long journey, and every time you put your foot down you start to drain the petrol tank, which is all well and good as your fuel needle informs you of how much petrol you've got left so you can moderate its usage. But what if you didn't have a fuel dial on this hybrid car? You would only know that you'd run out of petrol and therefore be totally reliant on the slower speed battery when you'd run out of fuel and the car won't go as fast as you'd like. And this is a situation we as endurance athletes face. We don't have a fuel gauge for our glycogen stores, so we've got no way of knowing how much we have used or how much we have got left until it is too late. When you've run out. Yeah, you can keep ingesting carbs, but these do take time to process and you still might be outpacing the input via your output. And this is something that happened to me a number of years ago on the first Velothon Wales Sportif. I was in a group that set off at quite a hard pace. We were averaging around 40 kilometers an hour for the first hour. So unbeknown to me, I'd obviously drained a fair bit of my glycogen fuel tank, but as I felt okay and I didn't have an onboard fuel needle, I carried on as normal. Then each subsequent climb or effort will have drained this tank a little bit more, with me being blissfully unaware of how low it was until bang, the dreaded bonk. And this is when you've run out of glycogen and are now solely reliant on your fat stores, which don't respond as quickly, thus they limit you to somewhat of a crawl no matter how hard you try to turn those pedals quicker. But not only is good pacing crucial in longer events, and the longer the event the more crucial it becomes, and you need to set off at an even easier pace than you think, it is also a significant component of time trials. In fact, the oft-quoted golden rule of time trialing is, don't set off too hard. A classic scenario is that having used online tools such as Best Bike Split to ascertain your average power in order to achieve your best time on a particular course is then to go and ignore this within the first few minutes and go way above it, simply because your target power feels too easy and you think that you're going to be slow if you stick with this pace. In a lot of cases, nothing is further from the truth, and you'll have already blown your chance of a PB within those first few minutes. Those of you who have done the classic 20-minute FTP test will know just how much harder a given wattage is during the last 2 or 3 minutes than the same wattage was at the start of the test. It's all about pacing. So now let's take a look at a small scientific study which explored time trial pacing. So in this study, 24 subjects rode a simulated 10-mile time trial on a computer-controlled electronic turbo trainer. They were instructed simply to complete the 10 miles as quickly as they could. Now, 3 of the subjects were complete novices to time trialling, and their power output graph showed that they'd not ridden it as to achieve optimum results. Let's take a look at the graph of one rider's performance during his first attempt. And this graph is pretty typical of all 3 of the novices who were taking part in the trial. So he accelerated to a power that he wasn't able to maintain, and the heart rate quickly rose to within 5 beats of his maximum. The horizontal line running through the heart rate and the power output represent the mean or the average values, and it can be quite clearly seen how the rider exceeds his overall mean or average power at the beginning of the ride
and then the consequent deterioration shortly afterwards. The subject then partially recovers and goes hard again, and this general pattern of overexertion and partial recovery was repeated for the remainder of the ride. The 3 novice riders repeated the time trial test around a week later, only this time the on-screen computer rider was programmed to ride at the mean or average power output achieved by them in the first test. During their second test, the subjects were coached to keep their on-screen rider within a few feet of the computer rider for at least the first 10 minutes. From then on, they were allowed to gradually move away but warned not to increase their power output too quickly. So let's take a look at the graph from one of the subject's second attempts. It is immediately apparent that it is a much better performance. The pacing is much more consistent. It shows that the power output did not exceed the overall mean or average power in the first few minutes of the ride, and the gentle start would have had a significant effect on blood lactate levels generated, and that would have helped the rider maintain and even gradually increase their power output later in the ride. And as a note of interest, it was a whole 1 minute 25 seconds faster than their first attempt, just showing the benefits of proper pacing.
So, they've just had some scientific proof of the benefits of pacing well. Yes, we all feel good and strong at the start of an event until the moment arrives when we don't feel good and strong, and by then, it's too late. I hope that this video, with a mix of an analogy, an anecdote, and a scientific study, has helped you appreciate why pacing really is a crucial part of performance in all manner of cycling events, whether it's a 20-minute test, a time trial, the weekly club or group ride, or a sportif or Gran Fondo. And all that leaves me to say is thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video then please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you know someone who isn't always the best at pacing rides, then why not share it with them? And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks again, take care, and goodbye!